Okay, welcome everyone. My name is Jared Holton. I teach in the music department at the University of Georgia. I'm also a member and former co-chair of the Society for Arab Music Research. We're really happy you're here. We look forward to this very conversational, hopefully informal talk with Louis Brehony here and many, many great things he has to share with us and a lot of music we're going to listen to. But I do want to start with a moment of silence to recognize and remember the ongoing violence and silencing of Palestinian communities. So please join me for that. Thank you. So we're really pleased to have Louis Brehony here with us. And I don't know if you all know him or not, but I hope 1 hour will be enough time for you to come to know some of his work and a lot of the people, communities that he works with through his book, where he features so many of these narratives. But Louis Brehony is a performing musician on bouzuk. I was asking him this question right before we started on guitar, on oud, perhaps a little rusty on oud, but maybe not so much, and then plans for other instruments as well. He's also a music researcher, an educator, and an activist. He received his PhD from King's College London and has published widely on Palestine and political culture. He performs with a Ghazelle band, Firqat al-Ghazelle. You can look this up online. Ghazelle, Gazelle, band.com to see some of their locations that they're moving around and playing at, some of the festivals they're performing at. 2021, Lewis came out with a documentary, Kufia, A Revolution Through Music, a Let Palestine Sing production. Again, you can find that online, Kufia Film, that's Kofia, kofiafilm.com. But we'll be spending a lot of time talking about his book, his 2023 book, Palestinian Music in Exile, Voices of Resistance. This has been published by the American University in Cairo Press. And it's a fantastic book. I read through it recently and was impressed with just so many of the stories and the music that surfaces through the more than 10 years of research that's going into this book, 10 years of experience that Lewis has with Palestinian communities. So, in conversation with Lewis, we thought this would be a great hour to spend playlisting some of those songs. He has a wonderful way of writing this book that tells a lot of history and culture, but also just does that through these songs that people are singing for decades that really have become so resonant for Palestinian communities within Palestine and then in circles that are moving outside of Palestine in different geographies. So, Lewis, welcome. We're glad you're here, and we really appreciate the late time you're giving us where you are. Let's just open it up with you if you'd like to share some of your thoughts about the book in particular, how it came together, what's perhaps most important for you in telling these narratives, and yes, just open it up for you to talk a little bit about your book.
Sure. Thanks, Jared, and thanks for the lovely introduction and for the warm welcome. And it's great to see so many known and unknown names. Hopefully, we can have a great discussion. Um, yeah, just to start with, I mean, I just got back from a little tour of Ireland, and we had a book talk as part of Boy Music Festival in a place called Drogheda near Dublin. And the question that people always ask is why, why Palestinian music in our context in Europe? And I kind of there's a two-pronged kind of answer, which I think explains the kind of angle of the book also. So my background is a musician, from an early age, I've played all kinds of instruments, mastering none of them, but exploring many of them. And then round about the time of the Iraq War, I got a different kind of an education, what I would term my political education, and then started to look at the world slightly differently. And then at a certain point, actually quite soon after, witnessing some of the concerts that were attached to the movement around the war on Iraq, which was also related to the Second Intifada in Palestine, stumbling across Palestinian music and attempting to kind of initially just to explore the kind of the politics and the culture that were presented in very kind of connected ways at the time. And those two kind of strands, the musical and the political, have kind of stayed with me over the last 20 plus years. And what I think I attempt to do in this book is to try and explore the stories attached to Palestinian music or music making in Palestinian contexts, and exploring some of the political connotations, but also vice versa. So exploring the kind of political and revolutionary histories of Palestinian politics, and thinking of ways, in which they do or don't explain what has gone on in Palestinian music over the same period. The book is a little bit of a whistle-stop tour, so each chapter focuses on a particular location. So we start with Kuwait in the period after 1967 and what it was like to be a Palestinian growing up in Kuwait. And then exploring other regions of exile, mostly around the Middle East and the Arab world. So it includes Bilad al-Sham. So there's a chapter which covers Lebanon, Syria, and Jordan. A chapter which covers Egypt, a chapter on Istanbul, a more recent experience, and four chapters which look at Palestine itself as a site of exile. So two chapters on Gaza. And of course, when we talk about Gaza, there's a quote in the book, "Ana mish Ghazawiya," from one of the musicians. I am not Gazan. The recognition that many Gazans are, or most Gazans are not Gazans, that come from periods of 1948 or 67 displacement. And then a chapter on internal exile within the borders of the Israeli state. And then looking at these locations, and what kind of musical or aesthetic forms they've thrown up. And of course, it's such a varied experience, not just from generation to generation, from country to country, but even within regions, the vastness of the musical and artistic approaches that has thrown up. And there are various kind of analytical kind of questions that are attached to that will maybe come out in the discussion of some of these songs. But I would say that my approach is inspired by a kind of a decolonial Marxism, and I refer quite frequently to people like Ghassan Kanafani, Palestinian literary figure and political leader, people like Leila Khalid, his comrade, people like Naji Ali, who produced the famous Handala cartoon, as well as to historic, analytical figures and contemporary ideas. So in a nutshell, I'm probably done that very concisely, but that's essentially what the book is kind of about.
Yeah, that's wonderful. One of the things, just adding on to what you're saying, one of the things that struck me in reading it, and I told you this just before we started, was I was so impressed at all of the musicians you featured and how none of them, with the exception of one, have a formal recording contract. So the book gives you this real family, street, and home sense of song and music that's happening, and you bring in these categories of tarab and nationalism that people outside of Palestine would understand, and relate to. but you show how musicians are, using these categories in different sorts of ways, and it's yeah, so it's a very very interesting and engaging take on Palestinian identity and how song and music resonates identities in so many different ways. So this is a good time, I think, to start on our playlist. So we've been working together to put together a playlist, and I think what I'll do is I'll put a link in the chat that will give you the Google Doc of the songs and the pieces that we're going to try to go through. There are 9 of them, so we're going to get through as many as possible, but we won't be playing all of them, of course. Just snippets, and Lewis has a lot to share about each one of them. So if whatever we don't get through, you'll have the link. So let me put that in the chat now. Let's see here. Here we go. Okay. There it is. The link is there in the chat. Yes? Okay. If someone can click on that and let me know if you have access, that would be great. It should be open. Good. Okay. So you can sort of see the kind of things that we're going to go through, but let's start with George Kermez, yes? And Ismi Shab Philistine. Let's start with that, Lewis, and I'll cue that up as you tell us a little bit about that song.
Yeah, well, thank you for communicating your thoughts on the book. I'm glad that those things came out. And interestingly, the idea of record contracts and all of this stuff, and you're saying, most of the musicians don't have that, and it speaks really to the grassroots nature of Palestinian music. And this song, I think, is a real example of that. So I have this vinyl that not many people have seen, which even the most diehard aficionados of Palestinian music
Wow.
have not seen. So this is the vinyl of Ana Ismi Shab Philistine. My Name is the Palestinian People by George Kermez. You can even see on the record, it's almost like it's been handmade or hand stamped. And it's a really interesting piece of material. So it's from 1981. George Kermez is, himself, for people who don't know, he occupies a really kind of a mysterious position in Palestinian popular imagination, at least among a certain generation. So in the 1980s, his cassettes would just appear in Palestinian camps in the West Bank or in universities in Cairo and Damascus. And there were at least 4 different covers that I've counted, the way that they were reproduced. And there was a lot of speculation about who he was. He used a lot of guitar and Western instruments and arrangements in his music that people speculated, was he even Palestinian? Was he Lebanese maybe? The truth was that he had a US base, and he was quite well known among certain circles. He operated out of Michigan, from where he pressed his records and cassettes, and he was actually an openly touring and recording musician on a real activist scene in the US. Interestingly, this track, the title track of the album, it's attributed on the album to George Kermez and a Belgian struggler, Monadil Belgiki. This could mean many things. I mean, Belgian was a kind of a racist epithet used against Palestinians in Jordan at a certain point in the 70s. But the words and music actually, I think, really reject the idea of identity and individualism in the first place. In the book, I compare George Kermez to Najil Ali, who had a similar mission. And the lyrics to this song say, "I have no other name. My name is the Palestinian people." The chorus, "Today I die, today I resist, today I live." So I think this kind of spirit of, collective contribution, I think, really shaped the kind of music that he brought out.
That's great. And I was in Tunisia a month ago, and I was sitting at a cafe talking about your book, actually, with a Tunisian friend, and he started singing this song.
Wow.
So it's a very resonant song with a lot of communities, right? Let me get to this. I'm going to share my screen. Here we go. I'll play a little bit of the intro here of him singing. أنا اسمي شعب فلسطين، أنا اسمي شعب فلسطين، اليوم أموت اليوم
Mrs. President. Andrea, Louise, and Mrs. President.
So we get to see a few of those covers, right, from the YouTube, a few of the cassette
Oh
covers.
yeah.
Yeah.
That was a little bit slower than the one on the vinyl, actually. I think when they put it on the cassette, it actually slowed the recording down. The one I've got is slightly faster.
Okay. Nice. Okay, so that's a good place to start. So number two, we have the song Maltini. And if I ask people to raise their hands, hey, who knows this song, probably most of us in the room would say, yeah, we know this song Maltini. But what's special about Reem Kelani that we're going to listen to here, Lewis?
So Reem is a real advocate of the idea that Mawtini is the real Palestinian national anthem. For people who don't perhaps know, the official anthem of the Palestinian Authority is a song called Fida'i, which before the Oslo so-called peace process, Fida'i was an anthem of Fatah, the Fatah movement, which has essentially dominated the PA and the PLO. So Reem presents this idea that, this is the real anthem, and it's a real kind of, I think, alternative national slash nationalist anthem, which, well, it appears everywhere. There was a big conference on Palestine in the US recently. I think it was called the People's Conference for Palestine, and thousands of people stood singing Mawtini. It was really interesting. There was a scene that I talk about in the conclusion section of the book when Rula Azar came to Britain and performed, and there was this kind of awkward moment when the ambassador, the PA ambassador to London, stood up and they played on a CD recorder the official anthem of the PA, and people just kind of awkwardly stood up. But then when she came to the stage and she sang Mawtini, it was a totally different experience. It was like, yes, there is a mass identification with this song. The song itself was composed actually by the poet Ibrahim Touqan against the British occupation of Palestine in the 1930s. And it's one of a number of songs that has kind of stood the test of time and passed, from context of a different occupation. So Mawtini, my homeland or my nation, the sword and the pen, not the talk or the quarrel, are our symbols. So I think that really kind of encapsulates the kind of the critique of the PA project and the kind of grassroots nature of Palestinian resistance, despite that kind of officialization.
Right. Okay. So let's watch a bit of this video then. I won't cue this. Let's watch it from the beginning. This is Reem Kelani singing Maltini. That's a hard one to stop. So that's Reem Kelani. That's amazing. A lot of power comes out in that performance, right?
Mhm.
Wow. So third on the list here, we're moving. Tamer Abu Ghazala. This was the one musician who has a recording contract that you talk about in the book, right? So can you tell us a little bit about Abu Ghazala? And also in your book, you mentioned that he was heavily influenced, like many people, by the band Sabrine, right? And
Mm,
so,
mm.
if you can give some of us, we don't have Sabrine on the list, if you can give some of us a little orientation to this band, Sabrine, and how influential it has been for many Palestinian communities.
Yeah. Well, first of all, just before that, I mean, I think it's interesting to say that one of the first songs that Tamer remembers hearing as a child was Motini, and he did appear on a couple of Reem Kelani gigs in London. Well, he's had this. I mean, people who might know his music may be surprised at the Motini connection because his music is a really kind of it's really difficult to explain, actually. He's a multi-instrumentalist, and they're often quite kind of frenzied arrangements. So he lives in Egypt and has kind of navigated the post 2011 period faced by musicians in Egypt. Um, so the kind of focus of my study of Temer's work was about this early 2000s period when he and his co-bandmate Huda Asfour were mentored by a figure called Khalid Gibran. Now, Khalid Gibran is the brother of Camelia Gibran, the singer of Sabrine. So Sabrine in the 1980s were a real kind of phenomenon on the Jerusalem music scene. They incorporated all kinds of different kind of international elements. In fact, when I remember when I interviewed the band leader Saeed Murad, he spoke about creating an international language through music. So they would use the buzuk, the oud, and the qanun, but they would also kind of bring in elements of Indian music and Western ideas, the guitar and things like that. And the poetry that they used was kind of really unique as well. So Sabrine were really influential to what came to be known as the kind of alternative music scene, and were directly influential to people like Tamer Abu Ghazala, not least because they were mentored by figures connected to Sabrine. Khalid Gibran, Camelia's older brother, was not a core member of the band, but he toured with them, and he's definitely a kind of a fellow traveler. And I interviewed Khalid as part of the chapter a few times in connection with Tamer Abu Ghazala's work. And Khalid's a really interesting figure. He's dead against the kind of Westernization, or what he calls the translation of Western methods of music pedagogy in the Palestinian or the context of the global South. And I think his approach was really kind of experimental. He was essentially a rebel to what became the Edward Said School of Music, and formed his own kind of methods of teaching, of which Tamer Ghazala was a student. So I think this song Takhabbut, which means clamor, is a really kind of encapsulation of the style that Tamer came to represent in the years after. I mentioned there's a story in the chapter on the book where he did a gig with his band in 2015 in Manchester, and they played the set, and then the crowd wanted more, and they just came back and said, "Well, we don't have any more songs," and they played the same song again, which I thought was really kind of interesting. I know he has got more songs, he recorded other albums with other musicians, but it just kind of led me to kind of think about this idea of repetition and revolution and reinvention. And in the chapter, there's reference to Marxism and Edward Said on these concepts.
Yeah, this is great. This is bringing to mind another sort of point you make in that chapter, which is how Palestinian communities have been doing a lot with alternative music before 2011. In the literature, there's this idea that there's this big resurgence of what we call alternative music after 2011. But you make a good case to say that Palestinian communities, based on their movement, migration, and all of the influences that they've been involved with, they've been involved with alternative music for a lot longer.
Well,
Okay,
absolutely, yeah.
yes, let's play some of this. I'm going to skip a little bit of the introduction and then play a little of Takhbat.
مش بس كان هداك اليوم مع عينه الشمس شربت كاس ونسيت تطلع ونسيت تنزل مش مسكين هداك اليوم مع عينه الشمس شربت كاس ونسيت تطلع ونسيت تنزل مش مستنى ذاك اليوم مع انه الشمس شربت كاس ونسيت تطلع ونسيت تنزل مش مستنى ذاك اليوم مع انه الشمس شربت كاس ونسيت تطلع ونسيت تنزل ليلة امبارح جاني نوم ليلة امبارح جاني نوم مع انه الشمس والقلقاس مع انه الشمس والقلقاس واحنا لسه في اول ليلة حلم والسحاب حلم والسحاب حلم والسحاب حلم والسحاب حلم والسحاب حلم والسحاب بتضحك حلمه في بشر بمصال حلمه والسحاب بتضحك حلمه في بشر حلمه في بشر حلمه في بقى حلمه في حلمه 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 في حلمه في بقى حلمه في بشر بمصال واخلط مع حبة والقاسي شرب بسط زيت مسخن حلمه والسحاب بتضحك حلمه في بشر بمصال واخلط مع حبة والقاسي شرب بسط.
Right. So I don't know if all these nuances are coming through the Zoom microphone or not, right? But you can hear the oud zooming all around, right? In and out. So you got some of the traditional sounds there, but then you have a lot of those different rhythms, different ways of composition. Yeah, it's fantastic. I this chapter I also remember this great sort of metaphor that's with Tamer's life is how his family moved out of Palestine to Cairo, right? And then he moved back at the end of the 90s, and that's when he did a lot of music studies at the Edward Said Conservatory and other places. And now he's back in Cairo. Is that true? So it's this constant movement that sort of shows up in his work and life and compositions that I think is really important.
Definitely.
Okay, so number 4, El Fanoun. We need to mention El Fanoun, فرقة الفنون الشعبية الفلسطينية. So tell us about this song, His Rim.
Yeah, to be honest, I'd love to sit here and talk a lot about El Funun as well. They've got a fantastic history and so much repertoire that is really kind of important and influential. But I chose this basically because it's one of the most well-known recordings of the song that I wanted to use to introduce the kind of material on Gaza. So his rim, roughly shake the spear. So this actually appears that there's a well-known study by Ghassan Kanafani of the 1936-39 revolution in Palestine, produced in 1972. And the lyrics to this song appear in this kind of political study as an example of the political poetry. So that, again, like Motany, this is an example of a resistance poetry which existed in the 30s, against the British occupation, and then was, studied by the new generation of Palestinian revolutionaries in the 60s and 70s. And it kind of came to me with the performance by a Palestinian band called Dawaween, who will, I think, possibly hear from.
You're next on the list, yeah.
Excellent. So they performed what I think was a really kind of a poignant version of this song in 2016, March 2016. And the vocalist Rowan Okasha was pregnant at the time. Her fellow vocalist was Raouf Bilbaisi, and they were joined by a kind of a chorus. His Zarim has this kind of call and response. So the female vocalist calls out, "Where are our brave knights?" And the chorus and the male vocalist say, "We are your youth, Palestine," and pledge to defend Palestine's honor. And then the verses talk about all these kind of famous battles and places like Jenin and Nablus and all of these historic sites of battle. It's a real kind of battle song. So it was performed by Dawawin, this band in Gaza, in the kind of post Second Intifada period. Now, the theatre at which they performed it is no longer there. It's one of a number of theatres that was destroyed by the genocide upon Gaza. In fact, it was destroyed before that. It was destroyed. In fact, the cover of the book is musicians playing in the rubble after the Said al-Mashal theatre was destroyed, I think, in 2018. Yeah, I think it was a really interesting song because it just carries that history and it shows this kind of drive to transmit not just the songs but the narratives, the history which is embedded in that song. There is, or maybe I'll talk a little bit more about Dawawin in a moment, and let's maybe hear the
Okay.
song.
Yeah, that's a lovely introduction, though. Thank you for that that history. That's important. Okay, this is a heavily orchestrated recording, right? Quite
Mhm.
dramatic. So unfortunately, we're going to have to miss the opening dramatic bits. You all will have to listen to that on your own. So this is when the call and response singing starts. I'll play that bit. Yeah, great recording there. Let me get this straight. So Dawawin is where we're going next. You're saying the recording that they did of his Rim is one of the most famous ones or the most known ones, or what's the connection with Dawawin?
So no, Dawawin didn't record it as such. So Dawawin performed this song. So that yeah, the recording we heard was Al Funun. I think what Dawawin attempted to do in Gaza was similar to what Al Funun attempted in their early days, which was this kind of focus on this revolutionary musical heritage. Now, in the second chapter that I have in the book on Gaza, it's about three musicians. So Rowan Okasha is the vocalist of Dawawin, and in the same community, same kind of friendship group, Sol Band and Reem Anbar, who's a friend of all of them. Um, so Rowan sung this song at this very particular concert at the Said Al Mashal Theatre in March 2017. The concert was
Yes.
billed under the title Tal Slahi. I pull my weapon from my wounds.
Hmm.
And it's quite interesting in the sense that, well, it just looked like a really energetic concert, from the few videos that are still there. But it was interesting in that it was reviewed in the New York Times, which is, a pretty rare event for any Palestinian music, let alone for an event that happens in Gaza.
Right.
And I really kind of probably go on the attack quite a lot in the chapter about this article that appeared in the New York Times. It's full of all of these kind of tropes and stereotypes about what Palestinian women singers are expected to do, and the idea that Rowan on stage was stood really still for fear of upsetting Hamas and all of this stuff. I don't know if they ever saw Fayrouz, a Christian Lebanese singer, on stage. She's as still as a stone. Um, and all of this other stuff, that they were singing these songs just because, that was expected and it was the only way that they would be able to get an airing in Gaza. So I think that the kind of material, when we actually hear from the musicians, when we hear from Rowan, I think really speaks back to these kind of claims. The idea when she talks about her upbringing and the kind of the cohabitation of different musical styles. So she says in the chapter, I sang all types of nationalist, revolutionary, and traditional songs, and especially revolutionary songs from the Intifada, but also including songs from our heritage, previously sung by our ancestors through all of their joys and sorrows. So Rowan comes from this huge family of musicians. Her father, Atif Okasha, is a musician, and mother is a music lover, and they've basically taught all their kids. There's more than 10 Okasha siblings, that most of them are musicians. And they were really kind of brought up in this oral learning environment that included Kulthum, it included revolutionary songs like Thawri Thawri, which I think we might hear in a moment. And the songs of the Palestinian heritage. So I think that when they were given the platform, it was kind of clear the kind of style that they chose to perform, if that makes sense.
Yes, yes. Okay, let's listen to Thawri Thawri then. This is Dawaween. And the next one will also be Soul. So these are two young Palestinian bands. And you talk about both of these bands, I believe, in chapter 6, which was one of my favorite chapters. It's a very thick and big chapter, but it's full of music, it's full of songs. So it's a great chapter to go to for playlists, making playlists like this, or learning some of these songs and how they're integrated into the history and the culture. So chapter 6, I believe Dawaween and Soul are mentioned in chapter 6 as with Palestinian youth songs. Okay, let me share the screen and let's look at Dawaween. Yeah, here it is. This is Dawaween, Thawri Thawri. Nice. And we'll go, should we say a word about Firqat Soul before playing it, or would you like to play a little bit and then talk about Rosanna?
Yeah, maybe play a little bit first.
Okay, let's play it. This is Firqat Soul and Rosanna.
عالروزانة عالروزانة كل الهنا فيها وش عملت الروزانة الله يجازيها عالروزانة عالروزانة كل الهنا فيها وش عملت الروزانة الله يجازيها عالروزانة عالروزانة كل الهنا فيها وش عملت الروزانة الله يجازيها يا رايحين عحلب حبي معاكم راح.
Okay, for the sake of time, I'm going to stop that. But let's talk about Rosanna. What is the story behind Rosanna, Lewis?
So it's a traditional song known across the region. So there's a few stories about how the song kind of came about. The most popular one, I think, is that a ship came to the region at a time of famine, and people expected it to open its bowels, and for there to be food in abundance, but it was empty. And the lyrics are admonishing the ship called the Rosanna, may God punish you for what you've done to us, essentially. It's not always sung in this kind of major, kind of poppy, dancey key. In fact, at one point in the research, I made a little bit of a list of the different maqamat in which Rosanna is sung across the region. So there's Jaharka, which is quite a bittersweet maqam, and even maybe something like Hijaz. I think it appears in different maqamat. What one of the things that Saeed Fadl, who's the keyboardist that appeared in the video, one of the things that he said that Soul Band aimed to do was to flip the idea of success and failure, and speak about the kind of the farah, the joy that exists in Palestinian life.
Mm.
So I think it's quite interesting that they arranged it in this way, you know, in this kind of major keynote. If you know the history about the kind of you know the lyrics are attributed to the famine and the ship, and then it's essentially a party song in the video. Everybody's smiling, and this I think is at the center of what they've tried to do. You know, throughout everything. I mean, even in most recently, that people may have followed the story of Soul Band in Gaza since October. There've been a few kind of Al Jazeera features, etc. They're out now. They got out of Gaza about a month and a half ago. But throughout, you know, their mission was to kind of go to the young children and to sing, you know, to make people smile. The name of that chapter, by the way, doesn't come from Sol. It comes from Reem Ambar, who's a fellow traveler. And the name of the chapter is Ahla Ayyam, the most beautiful days. Now this is a time when Gaza was again under siege, you know, during the Second Intifada. But the drive of young musicians to kind of find this farah, or this way of flipping, you know, the kind of miserable situation in which they find themselves, I think is quite telling and poignant.
Yes. Thank you for that. Reem Anbar, mentioning Reem Anbar, she's next on our list, and she's playing an Oud Taqasim in Bayeti here. She's also going to play songs, but I thought this was a good one, and a good one to sort of mark that you talk a lot about instrumental musicians in your book as well. Not just, I mean, songs are obviously very, very important for Palestinian communities, but also instrumentalists are important. Reem Anbar being one. I think I wrote a few others. Saeed Silbek, you mentioned, you feature in your book. Saeed Fadl, Ahmed Al-Khatib, Tariq Salhiya. So other instrumentalists that are playing pieces, and that those are also important in how they think about expressive culture and resistance, not just the songs, even though the songs are extremely important, of course. So should we play? Why don't I just go and I'll play Reem Anbar playing this. Let's see. I have to talk myself through sharing every time I do it. Here we go. All right, so she has played a taqasim in Bayeti actually up until now, and then she's going to start playing a more familiar song here. But this is Reem Anbar. That's beautiful. Can you tell us a little bit more about Reem Anbar? And we included a link, a video link in the Google document so that people could follow up a recent short, like little documentary, little featurette on her. But can you tell us a little bit more about Reem Anbar?
Yeah, I think one of the things that I always find really interesting are the arguments between musicians and the way that they kind of express their opinions, and you know, in aesthetic ways that sometimes kind of underlie other kind of strategies or ways of, you know, expressing the Palestinian situation. So Reem was an early member of Soul Band, and she cites artistic differences for her reason for leaving. I think I mentioned in the book that they were at a certain point they were accommodating to her idea of doing an oud solo. I think it was Lissafakir, the Kulthum song, you know, giving Reem the stage to do this instrumental version of the piece. But I think they diverged. You know, they still. I mean, they have family members in common. Faris Ambar is the percussionist in Soul Band, so you know, sibling disagreements also. But I think it's quite interesting the kind of different kind of artistic routes taken by one particular generation from a particular location. A lot can be said, for example, of Palestinian hip hop and the kind of the real vitality present in the Palestinian hip hop or electronica scenes. But there is I think a certain kind of element of the same generation that is really kind of firm in their belief that they need to transmit the kind of old is gold approach, to stick with the oud, to stick with the buzuk, stick with the qanun, and to use that as their kind of method for presenting what Palestine is or what Palestine represents in the world. And that doesn't mean, the fact that it is lyricless music. It doesn't mean in any sense that it is, I think, less political or less meaningful of the kind of political sentiments. Reem, for example, you mentioned Ahmed al-Khatib, two of the most outspoken Palestinian musicians that I can think of since the beginning of October. So I think there is a real kind of case to be made, or an argument I think is made in the presentation of that music that no, well, this is what Palestine is as well, And there was a concert. I've been lucky enough to perform alongside Reem recently. There was a concert in Edinburgh, a Palestine film festival. So Reem and I played together in the closing act, and we there was a discussion with the audience essentially afterwards about the oud and the significance of the oud, and there was a piece that she played by Ruhi al-Khammash. Now, Ruhi al-Khammash is a Palestinian oud player who was a bit of a child prodigy before the Nakba. He ended up in Iraq. Iraqi musicians will even try and claim him as an Iraqi, but he was a Palestinian. And the Ring just explained why it was really important to play this piece. It's the thread to a period of Palestinian history which was, well, forcibly destroyed and displaced. What was emerging in in the Palestinian urban scene before 1948, I think had all the hallmarks of the tarab and the styles which were developed in Cairo and so forth.
Yeah, thank you. We wanted to have time for questions, but we have two more on the list. So, with everybody's permission, can we skip Saeed Darwish? Sadly, but the link is there. Ahuda Ilisar, recording by Ziad Rahbani. And I guess you're going to have to read the book. Those who are interested, why an early 20th century Egyptian composer and musician is on the list, the Palestinian playlist, but rightly so. But why don't we end with Ya Naqab Kuni Irada? Yeah, can you say a bit about this recording, or perhaps a musician that you know?
I can.
Oh, there you go.
So, sorry. So the musician is Ibrahim Saleh Abu Laban. He, I believe, is a family member of the composer, the poet that wrote this piece of music. Whose name was Saleh Abd Ruba. It was actually composed inside what was then the most notorious prison camp of the occupation in the Naqab jail in the 1980s. And the lyrics begin, "Oh, Naqab, be strong, be glorious and pioneering, become a sword, a teaching from the lessons of the Intifada." And what kind of led me across this this song was a kind of a prisoner ethnography, part of which appears in the conclusion section. I think a short quote, but I've written about it elsewhere in an article called "Genius in the People." And the fact that this song is one of a number of songs in the repertoire of political prisoners within the occupation jails, essentially transmitted by Palestinians to other prisoners and as a way of kind of collective organizing. So this piece from the 1980s is still performed today, among the prisoners. And to me, I mean, I called that essay "Genius in the People." Because it was just after, the prison escape of Gilboa prison, in which several Palestinian political prisoners managed to escape. But also within the same prisoner ethnography, I learned of a Syrian oud player who'd been imprisoned alongside Palestinian political prisoners who had made an oud on the inside. So part of the kind of collective process, the drive to transmit culture on the inside led not just to the preservation of this forgetting my English, makhzoon, this repertoire of songs, but also to the drive to actually create instruments and create new music on the inside as well. And I think this song is a really key part of that repertoire.
Very nice. And the poetry written as a qasida, I think, an older form of Arabic poetry. So here we go. This is Ya Naqab Kuni Irada.
يا نقب كوني إرادة كوني مجدا وريادة يا نقب كوني إرادة كوني مجدا وريادة كوني سيفا كوني درسا كوني سيفا كوني درسا من دروس الانتفاضة يا نقب يا نقب يا نقب كوني إرادة يا نقب كوني إرادة كوني مجدا وريادة يا نقب كوني إرادة كوني مجدا وريادة كوني سيفا كوني درسا من دروس الانتفاضة يا نقب يا نقب يا نقب كوني إرادة.
Lovely. Thank you so much. This is wonderful. We have some time here. We have a good 5 minutes. I'm afraid 5 minutes, but that's 5 minutes of time we can spend with Lewis. If people have comments or questions, I'll check the chat out, but feel free to unmute your mic and speak. Welcome, welcome.
I don't hi, sorry. Really nice to meet you. And hi, Lewis. I'm working with Yara and Martin on that postdoc project on Cairo Congress.
Oh,
So I
great.
should
How are you?
Hi, nice to meet you. I just want to say thank you actually for introducing me to that. That's all. I don't have a comment. It was just it's really late in the UK, so this was like a really nice way of wrapping up the evening, and it's really special. And I bought the book in Cairo, and I can't wait to read it. So thank you so much.
Oh, thank you.
Hi, Lewis. I wanted to say thank you also for your presentation and for all this great music. And maybe if there aren't pressing questions, I would love to just hear what you had to say about Ziad Rahbani's version of Ahad Ali Sar.
Sure. To be honest, I mean, we could be here for hours just talking about Ziad Rahbani also. So this version was actually recorded in Damascus in, I think, 2008. He did a big concert. Just by coincidence, Tariq al-Salhiya, who's a Palestinian guitarist based in Damascus and who is featured in one of the book's chapters, he was a percussionist in this concert. But really, the song was and the artist I think was chosen in relation to a chapter that I wrote on Istanbul and a generation of Palestinian musicians who were kind of trying to make a living on the migrant music scene in Turkey, and they really kind of they played a lot of Sayyid Darwish songs and Ziad Rahbani songs as well. So another one was Shuha al-Ayyam by Ziad Rahbani. And the kind of expression of that, I mean, I themed that chapter around the idea of comradeship because there was this kind of leftist kind of culture attached to it. You know, people don't know Ziad Rahbani as well as being the son of Fairuz and a prominent musician in Lebanon, or also allies himself to the Lebanese communist movement. So these musicians in Istanbul really kind of kind of took on kind of anti-capitalist credentials alongside their work. And it's really interesting that, a composer like Sayyid Darwish, from a century ago in Egypt, has some currency among Palestinians. There was something that in my interview with Khalid Gibran in relation to Tamur Abu Ghazala and the work they did together. Khalid said to play or to sing the works of Sayyid Darwish today, you need a good reason. And it's quite interesting that those musicians find that reason within the kind of the situation in which they find themselves. Um, yeah, so I think the idea of comradeship and the idea of a kind of a critical kind of view of the world around them, I think they see as allied to adopting these songs and going back into that history and and what they see as a kind of a more honest way of looking at society.
Any other questions or comments? Lewis, we're so thankful for your book. We're so thankful for your work, and this overall project of making Palestinian communities visible and this work of liberation. Your book goes a long way towards these projects, and we're really grateful for that. So thank you for your documentation and your narrating and your connections that you keep sharing with us and others. And thank you to all of you who came. This is recorded, and we hope to post this on the Society for Arab Music Research website. There's an educational resources on Palestinian music and culture page, and we hope to post this there so that this can be used in classes and with students and just for our general education in the Palestinian music and culture. So thank you, Lewis, again for your time with us. We're really grateful that you're with us, and thanks to everyone. Have a good night.
Thank you, Jared. Thank you, everyone, for attending.